Marcus Williams drove home late at night, his tie loosened, his body tired but relieved. The neighborhood was quiet, lit only by dim streetlights and the warm glow of his mother's curtains. He parked in the driveway, stepped out of the car, and pressed the key fob. The silence was broken by flashing red and blue lights. A squad car screeched to a stop behind him, sirens slicing through the still air. Marcus raised his hand slightly, startled. "Good evening, officer." "Hands where I can see them." "Now," a voice roared. Officer Daniels stormed out, gun already drawn. His eyes swept over Marcus, not with caution, but suspicion. "Skin first. Suit second. Car last. Car looks too nice for you. Step forward." Slowly. Marcus froze, confused and afraid. "Officer, this is my home. That's my car." Before he could finish, Daniels shoved him hard against the hood. Metal rattled as Marcus groaned, his cheek pressed against cold steel. Porch lights flickered on. Curtains shifted. Neighbors whispered from behind glass. "Don't get smart with me." Daniels barked. "Where'd you steal it from?" "I didn't. The registration's in the glove." A sharp knee slammed into Marcus's ribs. Pain tore through him. "Save it for the judge. You're under arrest for grand theft auto." The cuffs snapped tight around his wrists. Breathless, Marcus tried to reason, but Daniels wasn't listening. Then, something slipped from Marcus's pocket, his wallet. Daniels picked it up and flipped it open. The ID read, Marcus A. Williams. The officer's eyes widened. His face lost color. "Judge Williams's son?" he muttered, the words barely leaving his lips. Marcus, still cuffed, lifted his bruised face. "Now you believe me?" Daniels hesitated. His voice faltered. This was just a routine check, son. You're free to go." Marcus didn't move. He held Daniels's gaze, eyes blazing through the pain. "No, officer. What you just did wasn't a mistake. It was a crime." The air grew heavier. Daniels's gun lowered, his arrogance drained away. Marcus's defiance burned quietly in the night, while the neighbors' whispers grew louder, carrying the truth down the street. What began as a stop on a quiet driveway was about to spark a trial that would shake the city and strip a cop's badge from his chest. Marcus stood in the driveway long after the squad car pulled away, the cuff's ghost pressure still circling his wrists. The neighbors' curtains fell shut, one by one, like stage curtains ending a scene no one wanted to admit they watched. He reached for the hood of his car and felt the dent where his chest had hit. The metal was still warm. He pressed his palm there anyway, gathering himself, counting breaths, refusing to let the trembling climb past his fingers. The front door opened. His mother's slippers scuffed the mat as she rushed down the steps in a thin robe, her face pale with fear. She didn't ask what happened. She traced the bruise at his jaw with the gentlest touch and pulled him in. The house swallowed him whole, lemon cleaner, old gospel vinyl, the faint steam of a pot she'd forgotten on low. She sat him at the kitchen table and pressed a bag of frozen peas to his ribs. He tried to joke about it. The smile broke before it reached his lips. He told her everything, careful with the parts that would hurt her the most, but there was no safe version. She listened, eyes glassy, hands twisting a dish towel until the cotton looked like rope. When he finished, she asked only, "Are you breathing fine?" He nodded. She patted the table. "Call your father." Marcus stared at the phone for a long second, as if it might change the past before he dialed. It rang twice. His father picked up with that same even tone he used in chambers, then went silent as Marcus explained. No interruption, no gasp. When Marcus finished, the breath on the other end of the line sounded like a door closing. "Don't drive anywhere," his father said. "Document everything. Photos of your face, your wrists. Write down exact times. I'm on my way." They hung up. Marcus lifted the peas. The skin beneath had blossomed into something purple and ugly. He took photos in the hallway mirror, angling the camera with the steadiness he wished he felt. He wrote everything he remembered. The words, the timing, the neighbors who'd stepped out, the slur of accusation that made his skin feel like a target. He wrote the line that burned him most, "Save it for the judge," then stared at the sentence until the letters blurred. Headlights washed through the living room curtains. His father stepped inside, suit coat over a plain shirt, tie loosened but still there, a man who left bed and put the bench back on anyway. He hugged his son without ceremony. When he pulled away, the judge's eyes cut their inventory: jaw, ribs, wrists. He did not say "I'm sorry." He said, "We will handle this." They went through the night like a checklist. Photos again with a proper camera. Measurements of the dent on the hood. Notes about where the squad car had idled. His father called a physician friend who met them in the kitchen and examined Marcus with quiet competence, documenting tenderness, bruising, the pattern of a knee. He left a copy of his report on the table and squeezed Marcus's shoulder on the way out. The house settled back into the hush of late hours. Around 3, when the adrenaline broke and exhaustion tried to climb his bones, the doorbell rang again. The judge checked the peephole. Internal Affairs. 2 investigators in plain clothes, badges clipped at their belts, stood on the porch under the weak light. They were polite to the judge, careful with their words, professional in the particular way people are when they know they face someone who understands procedure as well as they do. They asked to speak with Marcus. He agreed. The kitchen became an interview room, and the steam from the forgotten pot finally dissipated. The questions were precise. What time did the lights appear? Did the officer identify himself by name? Did he read Miranda? Did Marcus resist? Did he request counsel? Marcus answered with crisp clarity, the way he'd learned to be in rooms where power sat on one side of the table and you hoped it wouldn't tip onto you. He described the shove, the metal of the hood, the knee. He repeated the charge, grand theft auto, like a phrase that didn't fit any of the facts. He described the moment the wallet fell, the sudden switch in tone, the smell of fear coming off a man who just realized his error had a last name. The investigators took notes. When they stood to leave, one of them, older, weary, paused and said, "We'll pull the body cam." The words landed in the room like a second witness. When the door closed, the judge exhaled. "You did well," he said. It was the same praise he used when Marcus was 8 and refused to cry at stitches. Marcus didn't want to be proud of surviving a scene he never should have been in. He wanted the scene gone. They slept little. The dawn pushed color back into the world, and with it came decisions. The judge called a civil rights attorney he trusted and asked her to meet them at noon. Marcus stepped into the shower and flinched when the water hit his ribs. He dressed slowly, choosing a clean shirt with steady hands. When he looked in the mirror, he saw both a man he recognized and a stranger he wished the world hadn't tried to make. By mid-morning, the story had crawled beyond the block. Someone had filmed spots of the confrontation from a bedroom window. The lights, the shouts, the moment Marcus was shoved, the way the neighbors leaned out like a chorus with their voices cut. The clip moved through the neighborhood group chat, then spilled into the city's timeline. No names, no context at first, just an image to fill with outrage. Then someone named the street. Someone named the family. By the time the attorney arrived, a local reporter idled at the curb with a camera crew and the restraint to keep a respectful distance. The attorney, Gabriela Ortiz, was smaller than her reputation and sharper than the rumors. She shook Marcus's hand firmly, nodded to the judge and said, "We will set the table before anyone else does." She spread a legal pad on the table and began to outline a plan with the calm precision of a surgeon. "First, preserve evidence," she said. "We've documented injuries. We'll send letters today to secure the body cam footage, dispatch audio, GPS logs of the squad car. Second, medical follow-up to track bruise evolution, photos daily. Third, public statement, minimal and measured. You are not on trial in the court of opinion. We only say enough to assert facts and signal seriousness. Fourth, formal complaint to Internal Affairs, parallel to a criminal complaint to the district attorney for assault, battery, false arrest, and civil rights violations under color of law. Fifth, if they stall, we sue." She spoke to Marcus, not for him. "Are you prepared for attention?" He nodded. "Are you ready for them to question your character, your resume, your last parking ticket?" He met her eyes and held. "Good," she said, "because they will. And we will answer with facts." They drafted the complaint together. Marcus described again how words had turned to force, how the officer had seized not just his wrists but his dignity. He stuck to facts even when heat rose in his chest. He signed the document and felt a gear in his life slip into a new notch. By afternoon, Internal Affairs called back. The Bodycam existed. The file had been pulled and sequestered. They would not disclose it yet, they said. The district attorney's office requested a meeting the next morning. The judge's jaw flexed once, a barely visible tick. Gabriella smiled without warmth. "That's movement," she said. "We like movement." It was nearly evening when the first official notice hit the news. An officer had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into an off-duty detention in a residential driveway. No names. The anchor's voice attempted neutrality and failed. The image on the screen, blurred faces, red and blue, was unmistakable. Marcus's phone buzzed until he put it face down. Friends checked in. A former classmate he hadn't spoken to in years sent a paragraph about rage and pride. A kid he mentored at the community center wrote, "You good?" He typed back, "I will be." He didn't send more because anything after that would be a promise he wasn't ready to make. After dinner, he and his mother sat in the living room with the TV off. The house hummed with old electricity. She asked him to read Psalm 27 like she had when he was small and storms split the sky. He did, surprised at how his voice steadied on the line about whom shall I fear. When he finished, she said, "Fear keeps you alive, sometimes, but it cannot be the author." He nodded and thought of the officer's trembling hand when the wallet opened, how fear had authored every second that followed. At 9 p.m., Gabriella called. "We filed," she said. "You made the evening docket. The DA will see us at 9 sharp. Don't say yes to any interviews tonight. Let the system react to the filing before the microphones come. Drink water. Try to sleep." Sleep came in thin strips. When the alarm cut through the dark, Marcus felt older, like a version of himself had gone somewhere and left a sturdier shell. He dressed in an unassuming suit and met his father in the kitchen. They drank coffee without talking. When they reached the courthouse, the building felt both foreign and familiar, like visiting a hospital where you were born and now might be cut. The DA's office was glass and platinum beige, carefully neutral. A deputy district attorney named Ellis greeted them with an expression that suggested gravity and calculation had struck a truce. Gabriella led, crisp and clear. She laid the medical report on the table, the photos, the complaint. She recited the lines from the night that mattered. Ellis listened, took notes, asked for precise timings and witness names. Then he folded his hands and said, "We've reviewed preliminary materials. Internal Affairs is cooperating. The Bodycam footage is compelling." He paused long enough to make everyone inhale. "It shows the use of force you described. It shows the arrest declaration without probable cause. It shows a failure to Mirandize. It shows a change in demeanor after identification. We will move quickly." Marcus felt something unclench. Not relief, exactly. Recognition. The truth had shadows in it, but it was still a shape you could hold up and say, This is what happened." Ellis continued. "The officers' union counsel has been retained. He's on leave. We'll present charges within the week if the rest of the materials align. We'll need you on record, Marcus. Formal statement here, under oath." Marcus agreed. The oath felt clean in his mouth. When they stepped back into the corridor, the courthouse air felt colder. Reporters hovered at a distance, their restraint now thinner. Gabriella leaned in and said, "We'll do a statement on our terms. 15 seconds. Then we go." Outside, microphones sprouted like metal flowers. Marcus stood behind them, the judge at his shoulder, Gabriella at his side. "My name is Marcus Williams," he said, voice steady in the morning light. "I was assaulted and falsely arrested by a police officer in front of my home. We have filed a criminal complaint. We trust the district attorney to do his job. We expect accountability. Thank you." Questions flew. He did not answer them. They walked to the car under a wash of camera clicks. In the days that followed, the city rearranged itself around the case. Church pulpits braided justice into Sunday's language. Group chats turned into organizing lists. A community meeting at the rec center swelled beyond capacity. Some faces were raw with anger, some hollowed by memory, some careful, asking for process over fire. Marcus sat in the back with a cap pulled low and listened. An older man stood and said, "I learned to keep my hands at 10 and 2 before I learned to drive. I taught my son to keep his mouth soft. He's still got a knee in his back." A teenage girl spoke about how video saves some people and none of her cousins. A woman asked what good a trial would do if the next one just put the same fear back on the street. When they looked for him, he stood up. He didn't offer slogans. He described facts. He didn't ask for anyone to fear less. He asked them to help keep a record, names, times, any footage from the street that night. He watched as people wrote down an email address. He felt the strange heaviness of being a person and a symbol at once. He promised himself not to lose the person. The union issued a statement about split-second decisions and officer safety. The city's police chief issued a different one about trust and the burden of the badge. Anonymous comments on the internet slurred and speculated. Marcus didn't read them, mostly. When he did, his ribs ached, which he took as a reminder to stop. Internal Affairs called again. They wanted a walkthrough at the scene to map positions and angles. Marcus stood in his driveway, on a bright afternoon this time, and pointed to the places where the knight still lived. He placed tape where his cheek had hit. He let the measuring wheel click along the concrete. He watched as they plotted a graph of what fear and bias had drawn freehand. That evening, Gabriella sent him a secure link. "Do not share," she wrote. "Prepare." He clicked. The Bodycam video filled his laptop screen. The first seconds were his engine's hum, then the flare of lights. He watched his own face turn to startle, then to fear, then to pain. He listened to the words again. "Car looks too nice for you," this time captured by the officer who said them. He hit pause at the exact frame where his wallet fell. In that still, he saw everything. His own bent body, the cuff flashed with streetlight, the officer's mouth open in a syllable that would lead to retreat. He let the video continue until it ended with a jerky shot of the driveway gravel. He closed the lid and sat very still. His phone vibrated on the desk. A text from Gabriella, "We move to arraignment as soon as charges are filed. Are you ready to testify, not just to facts but to how this felt?" He typed back, "Yes." He meant it, but the word did not cover all the edges. He was ready because being unready had not saved him on his own street. 2 mornings later, the DA held a press conference. The charges were read in the careful cadence of the law: assault and battery, false arrest, violation of civil rights under color of law. The name of the officer, now public, hit the air like a brick. The city did what cities do with names. It filed them under memory. The officer surrendered that afternoon. Cameras captured the walk up the steps, the eyes pointed at the ground, the suit that didn't know how to hold a man who used to carry a badge. Marcus watched from the living room with the sound low. He didn't cheer. He knew beginnings when he saw them. That night, he couldn't sleep. He went outside and stood by the dent on the hood. In the quiet, the street seemed almost contrite, like it would have taken the hit for him if it could. He pressed his palm there again, then let it fall, then pressed it once more. He remembered the sound his mother made when she first saw his face, the set of his father's jaw, the careful shape of Gabriella's plan, the way the community's voices braided into something that felt like a rope you could grab. Headlights turned the corner. For a flicker of a second, his chest tightened. A car rolled past without slowing. The fear loosened its grip. He breathed in the night and spoke out loud, to himself, to the dent, to what came next. "We will handle this." Inside, his phone buzzed again. A message from a number he didn't recognize. "I'm a cop. Not him. Not like him. If you need me to testify about training and how that wasn't it, I will." He stared at the words until they settled. He typed, "Thank you." He didn't send it. He saved the message and turned off the phone. In the morning, he would meet Gabriella to rehearse testimony, to practice staying measured when the defense tried to thread doubt through his memory. He would walk through the scene again in a sterile conference room, his voice steady, letting the facts do their work. He would put on the suit and stand under the courtrooms in different lights. He would look across the aisle and see a man who once wore authority like armor and now clutched it like a shield with a crack. For now, he poured a glass of water, stood at the sink where the first photos were taken, and watched the dawn pick out dust motes like small floating vows. He touched the bruise on his jaw, now fading at the edges, and understood that healing did not measure justice. It only marked time. He straightened, rolled his shoulders back, and said the same 3 words again, this time not to steel himself but to describe a promise already in motion. We will handle this. The courthouse brimmed with an energy Marcus had never felt before. Reporters lined the steps, their microphones angled like weapons, waiting for the next soundbite to break into the evening news cycle. The sound of cameras snapping echoed down the marble halls as people shuffled into the gallery. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. At the front, the seal of the court hung high, the American flag drooping solemnly beside it. This was not a routine hearing. It was the opening act of a trial that the entire city would watch. Marcus sat quietly at the prosecution's table, dressed in a dark suit that felt heavier than any fabric should. His father was in the gallery behind him, face set in stone. Gabriela Ortiz leaned toward Marcus, whispering instructions. Keep steady. Don't let him rattle you. Facts are your shield. The doors swung open. Officer Daniels entered, flanked by his attorney. He no longer wore the badge, but his presence still carried the shadow of power, a man accustomed to walking through doors without answering questions. His eyes swept the room, searching for an anchor, but finding only cold stares. He sat down, avoiding Marcus's gaze. The judge entered. The gavel struck. Silence fell. The prosecutor rose. Your Honor, the state is ready to proceed. So began the process that would pit one man's word, bruised and battered, against the weight of a system trained to protect its own. The first witnesses were called. Neighbors took the stand, one after another. A middle-aged woman described the moment she peeked through her blinds and saw Marcus slammed against the hood. Her voice cracked as she recalled the sound of the officer's knee driving into Marcus's ribs. He wasn't resisting, she said, her voice trembling. He was just standing there. The defense tried to chip away, suggesting poor visibility, distorted memory. But the body cam footage waited like a sword still in its sheath. When the time came, the prosecutor played it. The courtroom lights dimmed as the screen flickered to life. Danielle's voice filled the room, loud and unfiltered. Car looks too nice for you. Step forward. Slowly. The sound of metal, the thud of impact, Marcus's muffled groan, it all played out in high definition. The words "save it for the judge" hung in the air like smoke. No one spoke when the footage ended. Even Danielle's attorney avoided looking at the jury. Then came Marcus's turn. He walked to the witness stand, each step deliberate. When he raised his right hand and swore the oath, he felt a strange calm settle inside him, as though truth itself had steadied his spine. The prosecutor guided him gently. Tell us what happened that night. Marcus described it plainly. The lights, the commands, the shove, the cuffs. His ribs still ached as he spoke, and he let the jury hear the pain in his pauses. He told them about the neighbor's stares, the humiliation of being accused of stealing what was his, the shift in Danielle's tone once his last name fell. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Marcus said. It was prejudice with a gun in its hand. The defense rose for cross-examination. Danielle's attorney circled Marcus with practiced ease, questions sharp as scalpels. You were startled when the lights appeared, correct? Yes. You raised your voice at the officer, did you not? No. I tried to explain. Perhaps your tone was defensive? My tone was survival, Marcus said. His voice didn't rise, but the weight of his words hung like a verdict of their own. The attorney pressed harder, trying to suggest Marcus's movement toward the glove box might have been threatening. Marcus met his eyes. I never reached for the glove box. I said the registration was there. He didn't listen. Each question chipped away at the defense more than at Marcus. His calm was unshakable, and the jury took note. During recess, Marcus returned to his seat beside Gabriela. She leaned in. That was flawless. Don't doubt it. He nodded, though his heart still pounded. As the trial stretched into days, The city itself seemed to hold its breath. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, chanting for accountability. Others stood silently with signs bearing Marcus's name. On social media, debates raged, defenders of law and order against advocates for justice. The city's police union released a statement urging patience and loyalty to officers under pressure. Civil rights groups countered with press conferences, demanding systemic change. Inside, Daniels finally took the stand. He wore a suit that tried to soften him, but his posture betrayed him. His attorney asked questions designed to frame him as a man doing his duty under uncertain circumstances. Daniels spoke carefully, avoiding the harsher phrases from his body cam. The neighborhood was known for recent thefts, he said. The vehicle looked out of place. The prosecutor's cross-examination cut through the varnish. You say the car looked out of place, yet it was parked in the driveway of the house where Mr. Williams lives. How was that suspicious? Daniels faltered. It was late. I misread the situation. The prosecutor advanced. You misread the situation. Is that why you slammed him against his car? Why you need him in the ribs? Why you accused him of a felony without cause? Why you failed to Mirandize him? Daniels's face flushed. It was tense. I thought. You thought what? That his skin color was proof of theft. The words cracked through the courtroom like thunder. Daniels tried to answer, but the silence of the jury weighed more than any rebuttal. By the time closing arguments came, the air felt electric. The prosecutor stood tall, voice resonant. This case is not about policing done right. It is about policing done wrong. Officer Daniels abused his power, violated constitutional rights, and assaulted a citizen without cause. The law is not blind to the badge. Today, it must see clearly. The defense clung to the thread of uncertainty, pleading for empathy for a man who made a mistake under pressure. But the body cam had left little room for doubt. The jury retired. Hours crawled. Marcus sat in the quiet of the courtroom, staring at the wood grain of the table, replaying everything in his mind. His father placed a steady hand on his shoulder. No words were needed. At last, the jury returned. Faces solemn, steps deliberate. The foreman rose, holding the slip of paper that would decide everything. We, the jury, find the defendant, Officer Daniels, guilty of assault and battery, guilty of false arrest, guilty of violation of civil rights under color of law. The words echoed through the chamber. Marcus exhaled, the first full breath he had taken in weeks. Daniels sagged in his chair, his face hollow. The gavel struck, sealing the verdict. The gallery erupted, some in applause, others in tears. The reporters surged toward the doors to break the news. Outside, the crowd's roar rose like a tide. Marcus remained still, letting the moment sink into his bones. Justice had been spoken, but he knew this was more than personal vindication. It was a spark in a fight much larger than himself. When he finally stepped outside, cameras and microphones rushed forward. He raised his hand and spoke clearly, his voice steady despite the storm of lights. This case was never only about me. It was about accountability, about the belief that no one is above the law, not even those who wear the badge. Tonight, a jury proved that truth matters. Tomorrow, we must keep proving it. The crowd cheered. His father's hand pressed against his back. Gabriella smiled faintly, exhaustion in her eyes but satisfaction in her stance. The night sky stretched above, vast and unchanging. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt that the weight pressing down had lifted, if only slightly. He knew the road ahead would still be long, filled with voices arguing, policies debated, reforms resisted. But tonight, he had seen a system bend, if only briefly, toward justice. And he promised himself, with the strength of every bruise and every breath he had survived, that he would not let this moment fade. The courtroom emptied slowly after the verdict, but the echoes lingered as though the walls themselves needed time to believe what they had heard. Daniels was led out not in the stride of an officer but in the shuffle of a man stripped of authority. The cuffs he once wielded now bound his own wrists. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In that time, the city simmered. Commentators on television called it historic, A rare moment where the justice system admitted its own failures. On talk radio, callers argued furiously, some insisting Daniels had been made an example, others saying he deserved harsher punishment. Protesters still filled the courthouse steps, but now their chants mixed victory with warning. This was one case, one verdict, not the end of the fight. Marcus returned to work, though he found himself changed. The office buzzed with polite sympathy, colleagues tiptoeing around the subject. He answered questions when he had to, but his mind wandered. Every click of a door behind him made his pulse quicken. Every flash of headlights in his rear view stirred a memory. Yet he carried himself straighter, as if each bruise had healed into a scar of resolve. When sentencing day arrived, the gallery was full again. Daniels entered in the plain clothes of a detainee, his posture smaller, his eyes fixed on the floor. His attorney spoke of his years of service, of the stress of the job, of remorse. Daniels himself finally spoke, voice trembling. "I let fear guide me. I was wrong. I'm sorry." The words fell, heavy but hollow, echoing too late. The judge, not Marcus's father but a colleague from another bench, delivered the sentence with grave clarity. This court recognizes the authority granted to police officers as a sacred trust. When that trust is abused, the damage ripples beyond one victim. It corrodes the very foundation of justice. Officer Daniels, you are hereby sentenced to 4 years in state prison for assault and battery, 2 years concurrent for false arrest, and the maximum under statute for violation of civil rights under color of law. You will never serve again as a peace officer. The gavel struck. Daniels sagged. The sound carried through the courtroom like the closing of a cell door. Outside, the city erupted. Some celebrated the sentence as long overdue accountability. Others called it betrayal, a sign the system was turning against those sworn to uphold it. Marches filled the streets, both in support and in protest. Television screens replayed Marcus's face from the trial, his steady words, the bruise on his jaw that had faded in color but not in memory. For Marcus, the days after sentencing felt both heavy and light. He visited schools at the request of teachers who wanted their students to hear the story from him directly. In gymnasiums filled with restless teenagers, he spoke about dignity, about rights, about the danger of silence. "I survived because of evidence, because of timing, because my last name carried weight," he told them. But the truth is, too many don't. And that's why we have to keep speaking, even when our voices shake. At night, he returned to the quiet of his home, where his mother still checked his ribs with a mother's care and his father's silence carried both pride and worry. He began journaling, not just the trial but the emotions that had no place in testimony. Anger that rose like fire, fear that clung like smoke, resolve that solidified like stone. Gabriella visited one evening with a stack of letters. "These are from people who want to thank you," she said. "Some are from other states, some from right here in the city. They see you as proof that it's possible." Marcus flipped through them, handwritten notes, careful cursive, messy scrawls, stories of traffic stops that ended in humiliation, in bruises, sometimes in funerals. He read them slowly, each one a reminder that his story had joined a larger chorus. Months passed. The city adjusted, but the case lingered in conversations, in op-eds, in police training seminars where instructors now played Daniels's Bodycam footage as a cautionary tale. Legislation was introduced to strengthen oversight of law enforcement, debated fiercely, amended, but pushed forward by the momentum of the trial. Marcus's life stretched in new directions. He was invited to speak at universities, at panels, at conferences on civil rights. His words carried weight not because he sought them but because he lived them. Still, he struggled with the duality, being both Marcus the man and Marcus the symbol. Late at night, he often whispered to himself, "I'm still me," as though reminding his reflection. One evening, nearly a year later, he drove home again, down the same quiet street. The dent on the hood had been repaired, but he remembered exactly where it had been. He parked, sat in the stillness, and listened. No sirens, no commands, only the sound of his own steady breath. He stepped out, locked the car, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't glance over his shoulder. Marcus looked at the sky, a dark canvas with stars scattered like promises. He thought of the trial, of Daniels behind bars, of the students who had written him letters, of the community that still wrestled with what justice meant. He thought of his own vow on that first night, when fear and anger burned in his chest. We will handle this. And he knew the work wasn't finished. Justice had spoken once, but it had to keep speaking louder and clearer until no young man would have to prove his worth on the hood of his own car. He whispered into the night, not as a victim but as a witness, a survivor, a man who had been bruised but not broken. We're still handling this. And with that, he walked inside, carrying not the weight of fear, but the fire of purpose. For more interesting videos, like, share and subscribe to Dark Wealth Files.